Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to the Amado Khaya Initiative, and thank you to everyone for joining. Let me just pull up my presentation real quick. Um, and how does that look right to everyone? Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking your time for this. And I really appreciate it. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. I'm had a cold last week, so it's just kind of lingering. And I also really appreciate you joining me during probably the dinner hour in California. I'm actually in Tokyo right now with my family. So this time is what works better. So I'll be excited to talk to you all about that later on in the talk about how we're really connecting agriculture in Asia and America. And just so you know, the background is from the amazing Oxford Tract Farm at UC Berkeley that I was working at until last year. If you're in the Berkeley area, I recommend to stop by. It's an amazing professor and student and community collaboration for research and education and feeding people right there on the UC Berkeley campus. And these are my kids who we had a little open house last year. So that's also my two little ones, why I'm doing this. Not trying to stand in front of them, but it just kind of worked out that way with the picture. But anyways, hope that inspires you if you're in the East Bay area to come by and see what we're doing there. Well, I'll jump right in. I'm gonna share what I've been working on and researching for about 30, maybe 40 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A. But I'm pretty casual, so please feel free to, you can put questions in the chat. I might not see them until the end, but or even raise your hand with the raise hand function if you'd like to do that, because I don't want you to forget your question or argument or whatever it is you want to share with me, because really see this as a ongoing discussion. Also, before I really get into it, I just really want to thank the Amado Khaya Initiative and Reimagination. Is that right? Reimagination Farm. I think you all are doing amazing work, and I think it's so exciting, hard work and important work. So if I wish I could be there to come to your solstice celebration, but it all seems really great. I encourage everyone to go by there and help out, and I'll stay in touch with the great work you all are doing. So I'll jump right in. The slides are advancing okay, right? Okay, cool. So first I'll give a little background on myself. I was born and raised in Berkeley, but my family is from Richmond, a few miles north, Contra Costa County, California. On the left is a picture of my family's nursery that was started in 1905 and went until 2017. Our family were flower growers in the Contra Costa County area, and those dressed up men and women in that picture are my great grandparents. Actually, my son is named after his now great grandfather, who's Isaburo Adachi, who started the nursery, and they raised five children there in the nursery. And the oldest one there on the right is my grandmother. That picture, I think, was taken around probably around 1920s, right there in Richmond. Um, so that really affected my orientation to this. I like flowers, but I ended up going more into food. But coming from the family business of farming, I had a lot of respect for it and wanting to understand more. Um, After community college at Diablo Valley College, I transferred to UC Berkeley, and I did the interdisciplinary studies field major, which is an amazing major at Berkeley that you get to sort of make your own, because I really want to study the legacy of U.S. agricultural trade policy in Asia. And I sort of stumbled on that topic, but I was doing study abroad, and it's how I came to Asia for the first time. And I was sort of amazed by the rapid transformation of the food and farming systems into a more American model in many cases, but not completely. So one of the main things that I studied for undergrad was something called the Food for Peace Act, which was a law that ensured that after an American war, American food products were brought into countries either as donations or for sale for cheap, which indelibly changed the diets of countries like Korea, Japan, the Philippines, other places that had been, engaged militarily with the United States. So for me, it was food and politics coming together, and I was interested in both, and I was really grateful I got to study that. So go Bears and yeah, go UC system for giving us, many of us, an opportunity to study abroad in an affordable way, which was great. I went deeper into my studies and actually went to grad school here in Japan. And helped me see the whole trajectory of food from Asia to America and how it's woven in with our immigration experience. Those of you who are studying Asian American history know there's so much to study, and I obviously can't give an Asian American history lecture right now. Although I was part of the group at Berkeley High School, my alma mater, where we established the nation's first Asian American history program for high school students, and it's still going strong. And I really got a chance to start to see the part of Asian American history that I was going to pursue, which was food and agriculture. So just glancing at some of these important dates, you can start to get a sense of how it has shaped our contributions to food. Of course, Asian Americans have been in the United States since the 18th century, and from that time engaged in agriculture. But everything really picked up in the mid to late 19th century, when the gold rush began and laborers were recruited aggressively mainly from East Asia, to work on the gold rush. A lot of people came, including my family, during that time, and many people were successful in beginning to farm, which is what led to the 1913 Alien Land Law, which prevented so-called aliens from owning land. And this was not because only a few Asian Americans were coming. This was because there were many here, and were already some of them being quite successful in agriculture. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Again, I'm sorry to the historians in the audience. I'm going so fast, but due to time, uh, speeding forward to World War II. Of course, World War II was a huge event for so many reasons, but particularly affecting the Pacific Islands and affecting both food sovereignty and land sovereignty in the Pacific Islands, as well as Pacific Islander migration to the United States. World War II was pivotal because that was when the U.S. annexed many territories and many lands in the Pacific Islands and turned them into territories or other undefined designations, political designations. Of course, the Korean War ended in 1953, which also encouraged many Korean and Korean Americans came to the States to launch food or farm businesses. Of course, in 1965, the Hart-Celler Act, which I'm sure you're all aware of, was really when it eliminated racial quotas, so many more Asian Americans could come, and this also indelibly changed our food system. Again, the Vietnam War, and then up to the present, when we have a constantly changing, dynamic, and diverse group of Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the United States. I think an overarching theme that I'm going to address in this talk about food and agriculture is really how American wars have shaped Asian immigration and therefore Asian American contributions to food and farming. This is just one example. I'd really like to lead with stories because I know you all get enough data points if you're in school or in research lives. This was one family that was a prominent farmer and retail family. They ran a farm and a store, and probably not easy raising, it looks like, what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, if I counted right. So yeah, raising 10 kids, running a farm, running a grocery store, and everything was lost when World War II began, of course. And Japanese immigrants became target of hostilities because they were linked to the enemy, which was the country of Japan. So families, the Isaris, I didn't know them personally, but they're one of many, many families that had a much different life before World War II and after. And this is a big part of my research. As the hosts mentioned, I was at Berkeley Food Institute at UC Berkeley for 9 years. And I've recently moved on to return to my writing, which is about Asian American food and farming. And I also consult for organizations. So it's really fun to get back into my roots, which are writing and researching. Of course, the wars also, as I mentioned before, shaped land sovereignty and struggles in the Pacific Islands. This is a photo of some family, working in their farm in Palau, where I did some food security work, where I worked with a national Asian American health organization to try to orient the economy back to local foods. But it's really a challenge because of the constant wars and annexation of places like Palau. There's been a cutting off of the local food supply, and through the establishment of grocery stores and aid programs, people have been encouraged to be dependent on imports from both the United States and Asia. As a result, non-communicable diseases are the leading cause of death in most Pacific Islands, which is really horrifying. And non-communicable diseases largely means diet-related diseases. So that means not things like COVID or the flu. It means things like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and these are all considered to be diet-related diseases. I'm going to now go in and talk about a little parts of early and middle Asian American food history, just to get your excitement sparked. This is really just a highlight, and a highlight of my research and what interests me. But I hope that this gives you many directions to go in and food for thought for our discussion later. One of the things that I've been very captivated by are some of the early seed breeders, and I know this is an Asian American seed saving group. I know this is part of the Asian, what did you call it again? I'm sorry.
Oh, the Asian American Seed Stewards.
Asian American Seed Stewards, thank you. Which is such an amazing effort. I know a lot of people are working on that now throughout the United States. And what's great is that we're not the first. There is a legacy of Asian American, of course, seed breeding that's transformed American agriculture. Many of you know about the Bing cherry. That's a juicy red varietal that was developed by Ah Bing in Oregon. He was a Chinese immigrant. It took him many years to receive credit because he was a laborer, but also a highly skilled seed breeder at the farm he worked in Oregon. And I believe it wasn't until many years after his death that he was given credit for developing the Bing cherry, and it was named after him. Another fascinating early agriculture innovator was a man named Kiyoshi Hirosaki, who was the garlic king of California in Gilroy. Was actually, before the war, was the largest garlic grower in the United States. And this is an amazing photo essay that I found there was actually a Japanese American arts magazine in the 50s. It's called Scene Magazine that did a full color spread on his family and how it was working. So yeah, they were in Gilroy, not only doing garlic, celery, lettuce, a lot of other crops like that. Of course, when the war came, he was imprisoned in Fort Lincoln, North Dakota, like all other Japanese and Japanese Americans on the West Coast. Another really interesting and exciting spot of Asian American agriculture innovation is Ma'o Organic Farms in Hawaii. If you've never been, I definitely encourage you to visit. Well, I guess you can eat Bing cherries. Bing is an ancestor. We can't meet him anymore, but the exciting thing is places like Hawaii are still going strong. Ma'o is the largest organic farm in Hawaii, and it operates a nonprofit to revitalize indigenous farming systems in Oahu, to teach them and to create jobs with that. And actually, young people, mainly high school students who start there, they get paid internships to work on the farm, and those can lead to getting an AA degree or a BA degree or a BS degree at University of Hawaii. So a paid job while you're going to school, working on the farm. Isn't that cool? So they're running a really amazing nonprofit / educational hybrid. I thought of you guys at Amado Khaya, and what's really cool about it is they're placing indigenous farming practices and sustainable farming practices at the center. So it's not only about growing something and figuring out how to sell it and make a living, which is hard enough as it is, but doing it in a way without pesticides and that is instead of pesticides using some of the indigenous farming methods that have served Native Hawaiians for centuries, millennia, and relearning and reteaching those, which is really exciting. So, I want to also like center all the different Asian American and Pacific Islander groups that we don't have time to talk about today. And also, this is going to sort of transition my talk into the importance of storytelling. Um, a lot of what sparked my impetus for this is, as I mentioned, I grew up in my family's greenhouse and farm business, and I sort of thought that was normal. I mean, who here grew up maybe adjacent to an Asian American farm or food business, whether it be grocery store, or maybe you could just raise your hand, grocery store, restaurant, or farm, um, or other kind of retailer. Anyone, anyone in the group? I'm just going to scroll through. Did you have relatives who had a restaurant or a grocery store or any other kind of food business? I might be forgetting, maybe a food delivery business, catering, or farming. Let's see. I don't see anybody right now. Maybe you're too shy, but I'm sure that there are folks. And what really struck me, to me, growing up on the West Coast, this was sort of normal, but when I got deeper into agriculture and I moved to Washington, D.C. to join the Obama administration to work at the Department of Agriculture, I was really amazed that there were no stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as part of American farming. And of course, this mimics the foreignization that we experience in many other fields, right? Whether you're studying literature or history or any other fields, you often might feel or have studied the phenomenon of foreignization. And I remember working at the Department of Agriculture, and there, people are really honored for having agriculture in their roots. And you have my colleagues would have a picture of in their office of a grain silo or a big farm, with the scarecrow, and I would ask them about. They say, "Oh, that's my family's farm in Kansas. Oh, that's my family's goat farm in Georgia." I said, "That's cool." And I called my mom. I said, "Quick, send me a picture of our family's greenhouse. I'm going to put it up in my office because they don't even know what Asian. They always say Asian. They don't even say Asian American." And I realized we had a big job to do to help make Asian American farming, our story here in America, and how it links to Asia, part of the American story. Wait, here we go. Okay. And I'm going to tell a story here about what we can do. And I'm going to start the what we can do section and why I think history and storytelling really matters. As an example, this is another farming family, actually, that my family knew in Oakland. They were flower growers, and who has heard of Fred Korematsu and his role in Asian American history? Again, those folks who have your camera off, you can send an emoji or something like that. I hope folks have heard of Fred Korematsu. He's a civil rights icon. That's him second from the right, looking handsome there in the back in his suit. But that's him with his family and a family business. So he comes from a flower growing business, same as my family. And I think they grew roses and carnations, usually selling to San Francisco market. And, this was back when East Bay was a lot of farming businesses. Um, so I'm just going to give you an example of how his family, took pictures, kept track of what they were doing. And then actually now his daughter runs a foundation to try to keep alive his legacy, and understand the role he played in civil rights. And I'll get back to why it matters so much keeping the story of him and his family alive. Because storytelling becomes history. The stories we tell now become the history of the future, for example. I contributed to this book called Eating Asian America. If you like sriracha sauce, then you definitely should pick up this book, because it's on the cover and on the spine and on the back. And it's a collection of essays about Asian American food and farming. And I have an essay in there which sort of kicked off my research on this topic. And I also write occasionally for a publication called Civil Eats. That's everything food system. I really recommend it if you care about food systems to read it, and if you have an idea to contribute to it. I wrote one piece for them about when a CAFO is a confined animal feeding operation or a feed lot. If you drive down the I-5 in California, you see them and you smell them over near Harris Ranch. Well, there was a big plan a few years ago to build a CAFO right next to a former Japanese American concentration camp in Idaho, where there was a cemetery and memorials that Japanese Americans visit, and they wanted to build a huge feedlot. And I was like, wow, this is really intersection of the two issues I care about, Asian American history and current day food system. So I wrote a piece for Civil Eats about this. And, you know, in the same way, I'm sure many of you are sitting at the intersection of different communities or different issues. And I really encourage you to use storytelling as a way to explain your way in and out of those intersections, especially if they seem weird or no one else has talked about them before. That's exactly when they need telling. Another way that I sought to shape storytelling is by getting involved in policy. A few years ago, I started a national effort called AAPI Food Action, which is an online community of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders working on the Farm Bill. That's the website there. We haven't been so active recently, but I'm still very active in the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill that's a whole nother topic, but I'll just in a nutshell, it's our national legislation that governs how our food and agriculture system is run, everything from subsidies, taxes, so money in, money out, programs, educational programs, research programs, foreign aid programs, everything regarding our tax dollars that goes to food and agriculture, and of course regulations, how people are allowed to farm or not farm. So much of that is included in the Farm Bill. It's huge, and it's renegotiated every 5 years in the United States, and it's under negotiation right now, meaning a new Farm Bill was supposed to be passed in 2023, and they didn't get it finished, and they did an extension. So this year in 2024, they're finally renegotiating it later this year. So it's a great opportunity to get involved and have your ideals and ideas recognized at the federal level. It's a great time to call your members of Congress, Senate and House, and ask them what they're doing on the Farm Bill and how is it serving Asian American communities. If you want to get some ideas, you can check out aapiFoodAction.org. We polled a bunch of activists and friends working in food systems around the country to ask what are the top issues for Asian American and Pacific Islanders for the Farm Bill. And we also tried to really identify values, like you could see here. You know, like for instance, trade is a value, and fair trade. For example, we know that trade is important, but what kind of trade should it be? And how will this affect our family members who are farmers, both in the United States and in Asia? These are the kind of issues we try to wrestle with, and we still have a lot more work to have our voices be heard in the Farm Bill. Going into the future, here's you know, another, I guess, blessing and burden of how we see Asian Americans and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders in food systems today. We know that fewer Americans want to or can farm, especially on a smaller scale. So that means there's a lot of interest. If for folks that do want to farm, it's exciting because there are more government supports, but it remains hard. And that's why it's challenging right now. We know that immigration does equal economic growth, and that it's in all areas, but particularly in the food system. We're still refuting the model minority myth and its ties to white supremacy, and of course that affects the food system too. So we're often, you know, walking the delicate line of we want to explain our successes and our setbacks without falling into the model minority trap. And I think that's why I'm also attracted to working on Asian Americans and food systems, because it really undermines the model minority, doesn't it? Talking about, you know, milking goats, or as you all are doing at the Reimagination Farm, milking goats, or saving seed, you know, or selling watermelons. All of this feels like a real good interruption of the model minority myth, and that's why I think it's cool as well. And just to fast forward to the current day, I told you about Fred Korematsu and all that he struggled. Over the past few years, there was a big fight to rename a middle school in El Cerrito, actually where my family is from, to rename it after him. And after a big fight, and actually many people said that wasn't necessary, or they felt that this was too uncomfortable for them, those people lost, and it was renamed after him. And Korematsu Middle School is now serving hundreds of students in El Cerrito, California. So I think that's a testament to the value of storytelling and getting our stories down on paper, or in this case, down on a plaque, on concrete, getting our names on concrete, so the future generations can learn about our contributions both to civil rights and to food and farming systems. And I welcome hearing, what are your contributions, or what are you thinking about? Because that means in the future, we might see your name there in concrete so that young kids can learn about what you did. So that's the conclusion of the main part of my talk. And I also wanted to just give a shout out to what I'm working on and how we can stay in touch. I mainly stay in touch through, I have an email newsletter on my website you can sign up for, and Instagram. I'm not really doing the other platforms, but also I might be able to see you at one of the 3 projects I'm working on right now. I'm a consultant for Saba Grocers, which is a mainly Yemeni and Palestinian Arabic-speaking group of grocers in Oakland who are trying to bring healthy food to corner stores and doing a great job buying from a lot of people of color producers in the Central Valley and bringing really good food to East and West Oakland. Also, I'm friends with and sometimes collaborate with 2 groups, Asian American Farmers Alliance and also California Farmer Justice Collaborative. So these are sort of, groups that are working to help existing farmers as much as we can, and also share ideas and share friendship, because I think if we can learn anything from history, it's also that how much we can be benefited by sticking together, helping each other, and forming organizations, because working in the food system can be quite difficult. But through camaraderie, it can be made easier and more joyful. So please keep in touch with me that way. And I think now we can move to questions. I see something in the chat. I'm not sure. Okay, so someone wrote to me, oh no, that we did not have Khmer or Cambodian in the previous slide, perhaps because there's less land ownership in the community. That's a good guess. It should have been in there. If it wasn't, then that's a big mistake on my part. I apologize, because Khmer and Cambodian communities have worked a lot on food systems. It's true, less on the farming side, which is what I work on, but I know in places like Pennsylvania and other states, there are significant Cambodian farming communities. So if it wasn't there, my absolute fault, and it should have been. So sorry about that to Narinda. Another really cool, I don't know if you guys have heard about, I think it's called the Pink Box Project. It was a project at Berkeley to record the stories of Cambodian donut shop owners. I'm going to drop that link in there right now, because it's a very cool a food system storytelling, which, as you can tell, I love Pink Box. I'm going to drop that in because it's called, yes, Pink Box Stories, sharing the stories of Cambodian American families working in the donut industry in California. And this is really cool. So this is part of my mea culpa of not including more Cambodian stories. Thank you for calling that to my attention. And if folks have other books or resources on Cambodian Americans in food and farming systems, please drop them in the link here. Share them with everybody. Okay, so I have another question. Should I just, I guess, read from here? Okay, cool. Number 1 is, in your experience, what strategies have you found most effective to get AANHPI voters more involved in food policies? Oh, that's a good question. I think the 2 strategies that have been most effective are storytelling and demystification. So by storytelling, I mean, as I said, I told some stories I know, some story of my family, and I think once people hear those stories, they might start to see the connections and feel that they can be involved. And then when you get involved in food policy, your stories are really central. If you've ever made a visit to a policymaker in their office, which is a really fun thing to do, they want to hear stories. So, if you want to do something fun on your summer break and go visit a member of Congress and tell them about your family's food and farming story, I can guarantee you that it's going to stick in their mind. And actually, they have to listen to you, especially if they're your member of Congress or your mayor or your city council person. So, um, so I think storytelling is very important for us to say our stories. And then by demystification, I mean that when I first started working in politics, it was very scary and intimidating. And of course, I was a elementary school kid going to Sacramento to the state capitol for the school visits, and I hated it. It's so boring and seemed not a welcoming place. So I can completely understand that feeling. I was just lucky enough to have a few great people who invited me in. So in the same way, I try to invite people in and say, this is your place, you belong. Some of those intimidating buildings are made that way on purpose. So let's get a thrill out of going into them and saying our stories and, bringing our seeds or our fabrics or our, films or our art, anything that represents our communities into those spaces, because really our ancestors built them. So um, so I hope those two are effective, but I'll say to Anna that I'm not sure really the solution, because we are still under involved in food politics. So I'm still working on that. Second question is, what are some challenges you face with, especially since AAP and HPI are not a monolith and have very different needs and histories from each other? Yeah, great question. I think it was really about finding common ground. We don't need to be a monolith, and we don't need to all agree on everything. But the reason why some of these terms were created was to have power in numbers. We all know this, right? So that's why I think that we can recognize our diverse needs and experiences, and also find points of connection to do political advocacy. So for instance, if one of the things that we called out on the AAPI food action, legislative requests was more assistance for fruit and vegetable farmers. Why? Because AA and HPI communities are disproportionately working in food and vegetable production if they are farming, as opposed to, some are raising animals, some are doing, soybeans or wheat, but those are smaller numbers. More Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders are doing fruits or vegetables. So based on that fact, we said, what do fruit and vegetable farmers need? And actually, it's a historic problem in the United States that fruit and vegetable farmers have gotten way less help. So you see how by research and community building, we could try to find points of leverage in the legislation that would help the most amount of AA and HPIs. So to me, it's not really about pushing everybody under one tent. Instead, finding points of connection, points of intersection that we can come together at those points and work together. And then we can dissipate after it's done, after we win, right? But just to come together at that point, and maybe in the future, like you said, how your farm is doing goats. Actually, it's interesting. Goat production has really been on the rise in the United States. And when I worked at USDA has been, reorganizing itself to try to serve more halal goat producers, serving halal Muslim communities. There's actually a lot of halal producers who are not Muslim themselves, but they're producing certified halal goats for Muslim communities around the US. And actually, there are a fair amount of African American farmers in the South who are working on goat production successfully. So, for example, I mean, since you mentioned goats, before we got on the call, you mentioned that you all are doing goats. Maybe the next farm bill or farm bill after that, assistance for goat producers and more connection among goat producers might be a priority, and many Asian Americans can't digest cow's milk, and maybe, focusing on both goat milk and goat meat might be something that many people are excited about. So that's just an example of how I try to address that, is finding points of connection rather than ever hoping for a monolith, because that doesn't even sound healthy anyway. So great question. Um, so any other any other, questions or ideas? Or if any of you, again, are starting Asian American food or farm enterprises, I'd love to hear about it, or you could tell everyone. I'm so glad that Reimagination Farm great. Thank you, Anna, for putting the link there um, to the farm and the event on June 22nd, which looks amazing. One of the things I'll just say that we really focused on the Berkeley Food Institute is experiential learning, which means, of course, learning by doing. And it's really been proven to teach in such a deeper way. And therefore, if you have kids or family members or you yourself want to learn about food and farming, I can't recommend highly enough to, of course, reading books is great, but put down the book and go out to the farm on June 22nd and get your hands dirty and have fun, because it's going to be a type of learning that's, irreplaceable. I have another question here from Isaac. You spoke a bit about the ways that Asian Americans have been invalidated in the food policy work historically. How have you been able to overcome these legacies in your own food policy work? Yeah, I mean, I guess just telling stories constantly, and lifting each other up, Isolation works by making people feel like they're alone. And I think that, for instance, developing AAPI Food Action was about these few AAPIs I knew, AANHPIs I knew working in food systems around the country. I called them up. I said, hey, let's all get together and start this thing. And they said, wow, okay, I thought I'm all alone. Great, let's do it together. So, I think that's really important. Sometimes there can be a tendency when there's only a few to push each other down because there's a feeling of only there can be one or two, and that's really the wrong direction. Instead, just a few means that we need to stick together more and help each other. And yeah, so telling the stories of my family, telling the stories of others, and lifting up those stories has been really, really important. Trying to get those stories published in various forms. I'm more of a writer, less the visual artist. I really admire the visual artists, people who can make films, make podcasts. Um, I don't know if any of you have seen the film Minari. That's a great film featuring Glenn, Glenn from Walking Dead. And Minari, I'm gonna put it here. I don't have the link, but that's how it's spelled. It's a great, landmark film about Korean Americans and farming in Arkansas. I was part of like the promotions and rollout. We did some panels about that when it came out a couple years ago. Now it's on Netflix, I believe, but just to show you the ongoing challenges that for the awards season, and it was classified as a foreign film just because people were speaking Korean in the film, but the entire film takes place in the United States. So, that just, I can't, and I think, the actors and producers were really angry about that it was put in the foreign film category. But just, goes to, like, I guess it's the same as like Godfather is a foreign film because some people spoke Italian in that film, right? But no one considers it that way, right? So, check out the film. I think a way that I've tried to do it is when a good story comes along, I try to scream about it from the rooftops. And, I'm glad that everyone's joining today so that you can do the same thing. Lift up local AA and HPI food heroes in your family or in your community. And, make their face larger if you can. Another question came in from Julie about my work on food systems in Japan. Yeah, so thanks for asking. So, I'm fourth generation Japanese American and mixed with Jewish American. I never went to Japan until I was 19. I did study abroad through UC Berkeley, and it sort of blew my mind. And I fell in with a group of Japanese organic farmers and food activists and small business owners who I really liked. So I ended up coming back and studying with them. I studied organic farming in Japan. I also studied the National School Lunch Program in Japan, which is quite amazing. And I ended up coming back here to do my graduate, get a master's degree in food policy on a scholarship from the Japanese government, which was an amazing honor and, blessing. And let's see, and then I ended up staying for a few years and working for my professor on a environmental publishing house called Yukurido, which means like take the slow road. It's a slow road publishing that we're publishing stories in Japanese and English about environmental heroes, not just farmers, but also people working on climate change, energy policy, other kinds of cool experimentation. So Yeah, so I've kind of stayed here, but ultimately I'm an American, and most of my activism work is, focused on the United States, but I do get a lot of inspiration from here, and I will keep writing about it. I'm going to drop a link in a second from, I've been doing some, I did some when I first lived here a long time ago, I participated in a young farmer training program, kind of like the one that you all are doing for yourself, a Reimagination Farm. And I wrote about it again for Civil Eats, and I'm going to drop a link here. So I think another kind of one of my roles out here is if I can if I can share some inspiration from what's happening in other countries, because that's another, I guess you could say, pet peeve is when people say like all the food system is broken, it's done, or the whole world is, going to crap. And of course, we can have that feeling because it has been really hard for all of us these past few years of the pandemic, but there's so much exciting stuff happening all around the world we can get inspiration from. So I'm trying my best to share that through my writing. Here's the piece I wrote when Civil Eats was just beginning. Oh my God. Wow, it's almost 15 years ago. But I did a farmer training program in the countryside in Japan, and I hope you have fun reading that and ask your members of Congress for the same type of program in the United States because we deserve it. Okay, Isaac also loved Minari. Cool. Still listen to the soundtrack. Okay, I didn't really know about the soundtrack, so thank you. I'll listen to the soundtrack from Minari. And I was excited to see that I think it's on Netflix or Apple TV that anyway, easier to watch now. Emma's wow, Emma's family owns a ranch and they'll be checking out the farm bill. Yay. I'm so happy to hear that. Look, here's a little tip. Look up who is your do you know, Emma, who is your member of the House of Representatives? Because all of the members will be voting on the Farm Bill, but a few members are on something called the Agriculture Committee, and they are really the experts and the first authors of the Farm Bill. So if your member is on the Ag Committee, then you absolutely need to go visit him or her and tell them about your farm and what you need. Absolutely. If they're not on the farm bill, they might know less about it and they might be like, can't really follow. But you should still tell them what you're doing. But if they're on the agriculture committee, then they really know, and they should know about the great work you're doing on the ranch, and they should be friends with you. So thanks for sharing about that, and good luck. I'd love to hear what you're growing, Emma, so you could drop that in the chat too. Okay, May has a question. What are your tips for introducing students in urban centers to farm, rural food issues that impact food production and consumption across communities? That is a great, great question. Well, everywhere people are starting farms, everywhere. I'll just say that when I was at Berkeley Food Institute, we're in a very expensive, crowded urban area. We had a student farm on campus at Oxford Tract. We also closely collaborated with a few community farms around the Bay Area, including Urban Tilth, which is in Richmond, People's Program in Oakland. Also in Oakland, there's a Castlemont farm at Castlemont High School. They're doing great work. So as much as possible, just start a farm where you are, using boxes. If you don't have access to land, you can just use boxes. And also as much as possible, if you can, save up money to do a tour of a place even close by, like Brentwood, like Kelseyville, like Gilroy, like Salinas. There's a lot of places and existing tours where you can go, and to spend a day or a couple days really farming and learning can be an unforgettable experience. What's interesting is my dad went to Berkeley in the 60s, and he told me recently that he had gone on a farm worker solidarity trip in the 60s where the Berkeley students went down there and worked on the farm and learned from the farm workers how they can support them more. I said, wow, that's not happening anymore. So some things have already been happening years ago. But living in California, so much farming happens in California. And I think your question is great, May, because we have to bridge that divide that keeps us apart because we need each other. People living in the urban center have a responsibility to take care of rural communities, express gratitude, and and help understand where our food comes from. And in exchange, folks working in food production often want to know, where did their food go and what happens. So, and what are students studying, and how can students, graduate and help out in food systems. So, I think doing it yourself and making time to prioritize trips to food production are what I highly recommend. Okay, Narinda, I hope I'm saying your name right. Also gave a feedback. Living in the diaspora, growing food. Absolutely. Oakland trying to grow 1/3 of its food from back in 2009. Yeah, I'm not sure if Oakland is growing 1/3 of its food. But here's the other thing also to remember is, as you rightly point out, Narinda, is like growing food in urban areas, it's not just about quantities, it's also really about the learning and the community. One scholar of urban farmings, or what did they say, community gardens, they're also called it. They said the most important thing we're growing in community gardens is not the food, or it's not the garden, it's the community. So, being together and growing together, knowing our neighbors is actually a huge step towards food security. And sharing seeds in an urban environment. Actually, some of the research that we did at Berkeley was researching some of the urban farms in the Hayward, San Leandro area, many of which were being led by Asian immigrant and refugee families who were sort of under the radar, growing some amazing seeds that actually this researcher found were not being grown almost anywhere else in the United States. Isn't that cool? And they were doing it, sometimes under a freeway in San Leandro, growing this amazing cornucopia of crops. So you're right, amazing things are happening in urban communities. And, we also can take time to visit rural communities, understand the challenges, and, maybe get excited to start a farming career ourselves. Okay, thank you for answering my question, Emma. Lamb and pig, awesome. Also garlic, that all goes together, lamb, pig, and garlic. And and really underscoring how important it is to have that community. Absolutely. Let me drop let me drop one more link in while you all are thinking about questions. Give me a second because I know you might not, if I send a follow-up email, nobody will see it. So let me just drop two links about what I said. They're called biocultural hotspots for the immigrant farmers, like I said, in San Leandro. And then what was the other one I was going to share about, let's see, impact about introducing students to rural food. Okay, yes, let me drop you give me 1 second. Okay. I have to say, for all of its downsides, Google is so amazing to really find everything quickly. So this is the report that we did years ago at the Berkeley Food Institute about what they call agro-biodiversity hotspots in urban food deserts. And it's amazing. Some of these researchers, they go deep into the jungle in Costa Rica or something, and they find something what they call is a biodiversity hotspot, meaning, and I learned this from them, it's a center of tremendous biodiversity. So they try to track it. Why did it happen in this area? What's the climate? What's the trees and stuff? And what's really cool is that these researchers found the same thing is happening. You don't have to go all the way to the mountains of Costa Rica. It's happening in San Leandro and Hayward and San Jose. And so I think it's really cool research for that. Um, yeah, and really a lot of the research that's happening at Berkeley Food Institute, where I no longer work, but I'm on the advisory board and I love what they're doing, is really about urban ag and urban ag's contribution, studying urban ag all around the country and the world and understanding its contribution. So that's really cool. By the way, Emma, did you find out who your member of Congress is? Because I want to know now, what they're working on pigs and lamb and if they're helping. Oh, okay. Um, I'm gonna share with you a resource for that. Here you go. There you go, haha, Emma. No, so that you can find find your rep and everyone else can. I didn't go deep into the Farm Bill. I also give another lecture on the Farm Bill. I didn't have time to go into that. Just to give you a sense of how big the Farm Bill is, I taught a graduate seminar on the Farm Bill where we talked about the Farm Bill for 3 hours every week for a whole semester, and we still didn't get through the whole thing. So there's a lot. Yeah, my pleasure, Emma. There's a lot about the Farm Bill to cover. But I'll just say that it's very, very important and it's on your representative's desk right now. So thank you, Anna. You have a question about farmers. One farm focusing on native Hawaiian farming methods. You have stories with other indigenous groups. Yeah, sure. Well, as I said that I couldn't, unfortunately, I couldn't find any public website about my work in Palau. So I was working on something called National Asian Pacific Network to eliminate health disparities. And we were actually working here. Let me drop this in this because maybe you guys want to go for this money. CDC, and ethnic. I'm going to share. Everyone wants to know about funding opportunities, right? So this was this is, wow, it's a very long website. Okay, here. I think this looks very ugly, this link. But this is a program that I worked for that funded what they call racial and ethnic approaches to community health. And one of the projects was in the nation of Palau, trying to reinstate some, native food. And what we did is actually we did surveys around the country. Again, I'm sorry I don't have a link to that project, but we did surveys around the country on what people are eating and shockingly, and also perceptions of what they're eating. And we found a shockingly low rate of eating many amazing local foods, including people's perception that it was too expensive and that some grocery store junk foods were cheaper. So then we actually had researchers do an analysis of some of the local foods to really analyze the price comparison. And we had some surprises. It's true that some of the local vegetables were more expensive, but many of them were cheaper. And we really broke it down into a per serving cost and, help to hear the community's concerns and also try to analyze why people, because the problem is in many Pacific Islands, tourism is such a big industry. So tourists bring their own type of food and also have a taste for certain expensive luxury foods. And that can both drive up prices locally, but also affect perceptions about what's good to eat, right? Or, a new, fast food restaurant or California Pizza Kitchen or whatever opens in a Pacific Island, people see it so expensive and then sort of, become frustrated that it's not affordable when their own local food might be, sitting there, rotting, especially with like young people who of course want to have the new cool thing. So we're trying to really study and bust open perceptions of some of the traditional island foods and help them be more accessible, particularly to younger Palauans, which was really exciting and fun. So, yeah, there's a lot happening there. But I think that really it comes down to, again, it's the same struggle we're doing on the mainland, which is about valuing local foods, understanding how they're changing with the climatic conditions, and trying to realign our economy and politics around being able to access our local and traditional foods. So in that way, it's not different than what we're dealing with on the mainland. But as we know, Pacific Islands are particularly susceptible to the effects of climate change. So that's affecting farming, even more. But I tried to bring a storytelling element because we know that I feel that storytelling is so important to keep alive some of those food traditions. So thank you. Do we have any more other questions or research? Did everyone get to save that link for Find Your Representative? Because yeah, even if you're not a citizen, you can still share with them what you're doing in farming, even if it's not about you voting. You can still participate in the farming programs and let your reps know what you care about in food systems. So any other questions, ideas, or input? I love this community that came on the talk. I love all your, varied experiences. Thank you for participating and sharing them. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina. I think we'll wrap it up now
Oh.
since it's the hour, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Yes, everyone like do the clapping emojis in the chat and just here. Yeah, thank you. I look forward to connecting again soon. And for everyone else in the chat, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing everyone in our next talk on June 12th.
Thank
Great.
you. Thank you so much. Thanks all. I'll have my kids as a cameo next time. No, thanks a lot, you guys, for coming. Take care. Thank you.